Hello trainers, Syke here with an Inteleon game. Now, this isn't a normal type of video. I've been playing Inteleon a lot. It's very good. And I feel like we have a lot of discussion amongst people about Pokemon like Mewtwo, Zacian. I think Zacian's not as big of a discussion anymore, but it still is very overpowered, very top of the leaderboard. I mean, even at level 1, its attack and crits can just like burst down opponents even more than like a level 15 of certain attackers. Like it's that strong. And at level 3 on Goal Zone, it can easily fight you if it's a good player. I think the Aeos energy nerf they did to it was a very good nerf, and it's fixed it a lot because now it can't do the crazy double attacks that it used to be able to, and it has a limit on scoring. But I do think that just its auto attacks alone as an ADC attacker is very strong in comparison to others, especially at lower levels. So it doesn't need power spikes. Like, it doesn't have very many power spikes as in comparison to, like, say, like a Cinderace or a Decidueye that have to fully evolve before they get their power spikes. And there's the problem with Mewtwo. Now, I think a huge problem in this game that a bunch of people have pointed out is that there is way too much point-and-click damage on the field. And I think another perpetrator of this, and a Pokemon that hasn't been talked about as much, but as you can kind of start to see it invading your matches, and is also another user of this point and click, is Liquidation Inteleon. And I think it's a Pokemon that is amazing early game. It has an amazing Steel move and Water Gun, and then once it gets its Fell Stinger and Acrobatics, it can easily get up charges to make its Liquidation and just its regular auto attacks do a ton of damage. And I think what's crazy about Inteleon that makes it so strong, and the reason why it's up on the leaderboards as far as win rate goes as well, which of course win rate is a skewed statistic. If more people play the Pokemon, then obviously the win rate's going to get lower because there's this huge saturation of people. Like, Mewtwo's win rate realistically isn't as low as it is. Like, it should actually be higher because there's a lot of people that are playing Mewtwo, and the Mewtwo are on both teams, and so obviously one of those Mewtwo's is going to lose. So that statistic kind of gets skewed towards the 50-50. However, it's higher than 50% because of how good Mewtwo is. Whenever there's a Mewtwo on the enemy team and not on your team, or on your team and not on the enemy team, it's more likely to win. It's a huge percentage chance to win over the other. Now, I wanted to bring this video to attention because of Inteleon. Now, Inteleon has point and click, just like Psystrike, and just like Mewtwo, it also has a very good auto attacks. Inteleon's auto attacks, whether you're in or out of your ult, are amazing. And the thing about Inteleon is after its release, it didn't get nerfed. The only thing that happened to it was actually a buffed Fell Stinger because it was a bad move in comparison to Acrobatics. Now Fell Stinger is just as viable and sometimes more viable depending on your matchups. Fell Stinger is amazing on the Rayquaza map because of just how many walls exist in that map for you to use to Fell Stinger onto. And it provides greater mobility over a longer point than Acrobatics. However, I do think Acrobatics is better for in the middle of fights because you can jump on top of your opponents and maneuver around them. It's better for it's better against attackers, I'd say, and Pokemon that have a lot of stuns because you can easily dodge over the opponent with it. Now, I feel like Inteleon's a little bit more balanced than, say, like a Mewtwo because it's very easy to catch out and get killed. However, its invisibility makes it a little bit more difficult to catch out and get killed, especially because it has good mobility and invisibility to where you can't just say point and click it unless you actually make it up here first. So I will say that about Inteleon. Now, I think Inteleon should be talked about though. Like, what should we do to nerf this Pokemon? I would love to see some examples of that. Maybe some people have already thought of some examples of that. I wanted to go through some of my own thoughts about what can be done because I think this Pokemon is very fun. I think the way that it plays and the way that it is right now is very fun. It's overpowered, definitely. I'd say it's a bit unfair sometimes, definitely. Especially the way that the point and click works, where if you can just point and click a target and then maybe Acrobatics or Fell Stinger into a wall and literally get so far out of range, they get hit and can even go back to their goal zone and still die because of how Liquidation works, especially with the crit counter stacks that it gives, and crits the entirety of the move. Now, in my head, the one thing that I've been thinking about is, like, how do you nerf this point and click damage in its entirety? And I think one thing they need to do is they need to make a limit to the range of point and click damage. I think this would severely make Pokemon like Inteleon, Glaceon, even Mewtwo, Psystrike a lot worse without taking away the fun of using the move. I would say that you don't have to and I don't want it to be limited to you have to stay inside of your like auto attack range for the point and click to hurt, but I would say there should be a secondary ring around the character that they make of a range. Maybe it's like double the range of the initial person's of the initial character's auto attacks that the auto attacks hit. So like a Pokemon like Mewtwo would have actually a shorter range where its auto attacks hit with Psystrike because of his auto attack range being shorter. But during Mega Evolution, his auto attack range gets increased, I think. So during that Mega Evolution, Psystrike would have an increased distance in which it still hits the target. Now, if you move outside that distance, then the attack gets canceled, and you don't get the Final Blast, or you don't get the last couple Laser Beams. Same with Liquidation, Icicle Spear. I think you still want it to be fun to the point where you can point and click and get out of the target's range, but not to the point where you go all the way back to your own goal zone or go like super far across the map and you're still hitting it, right? And I think this is also good because it would, bring it more counterplay to point and click. If someone point and clicks you, if you have an eject button, you could like eject away, or a mobility move, you can mobility away from the target to a certain point, and then you would stop getting hit by it. It brings good counterplay. I think it makes the Pokemon more skilled to play, because you would maybe predict your opponent to trying to run away really quick to get away from the point and click, so you actually go towards them to make sure it keeps hitting. I think that could bring about some certain cool situations in this match. And now, as you can see in the match that I'm showing to you guys right now, which I just wanted to play in the background, Pokemon like Cinderace and other auto attackers just get completely melted down by Inteleon. I think this match is important because I wasn't even playing jungle. I don't even think this was a good game as Inteleon. I don't even have good attack points. I still get 12 KOs because all I have to do is get in point and click range and click it, and I'm good. And I think another thing is like Inteleon can just completely turn around these fights. And it's not like it doesn't have any counterplay. It's just that it is one of those Pokemon that is a problem right now. Especially whenever your team is playing a bunch of attackers that can easily get one-shot by Liquidation, and your team doesn't have an Inteleon and the other team does. It's very difficult to counterplay it. And Inteleon also does really good against defenders, all-rounders, lots of things, because it actually does enough damage to kill defenders, especially with its ult in combination as well. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. It is very fun though. I don't want to take away the fun of playing this Pokemon. So that's why I was, coming up with this kind of like idea for point and click damage, because I think it still keeps the fun of the Pokemon without taking it away too much. I think doing move cooldowns is also another solution, but then again, I think Felstinger with its move cooldown reduction makes Felstinger so much more fun to play, and I would hate to see it getting a huge cooldown nerf because of how well Inteleon's doing. I think Acrobatics and then Felstinger should stay the same. I think it makes it so much more viable. Like, I feel like if you take away the cooldowns on Acrobatics and Felstinger, you kind of ruin the crit counters that you can get on Inteleon, and it's much less fun of a Pokemon to play. And Inteleon is still pretty skilled. I feel like people don't realize, like, it is very skilled. It can do a lot more. Like, there's an average player like base that can play it and do okay with it, but it can be heightened a lot. Like, it can be done really well if you know how to play around your invisibility, especially in the early game, learning how to get your water guns out, learning how to position yourself as Inteleon throughout the map. It's a whole different playstyle, and I don't want to take away from that. Now, increasing cooldowns on Liquidation, I feel like that's a good idea. Do it. I think that's good. Here's the thing about Inteleon, is it works as an auto attack as well. So even if you don't have Liquidation up, you can still auto attack. It doesn't make the Pokemon more useless, it just makes the Pokemon more balanced, because you're not using the point and click as often. I think that's a really easy way to do it. I don't think there should be a stat nerf. I don't think there should be a ability, there shouldn't be an ability nerf. Hopefully they don't do that, because the invisibility around Inteleon is already pretty difficult to play around as is, because you have to be out of combat for you to start getting your invisibility, and you have to like stay near a wall for a good amount of time, which I think is another part that players like that play Inteleon for the first time don't realize. You have to be out of combat for a good percentage of the time and go for last hits by being out of combat and not actually going back in. You want to stay out of combat in your invisibility to get all 3 of your stacks before re-entering combat. Oops. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think point and click, that's a good way to nerf it. I think you don't want to nerf it to the point where if it goes outside of the actual range of the Pokemon that it stops hitting, because I feel like once you do that, then you can't even, the Pokemon aren't even going to be viable, really. I mean, Mewtwo will still be viable, obviously. I mean, it still has Future Sight, right? The pull move. It still has lots of options, but I think Pokemon like Glaceon and Inteleon will be far less viable if you do something like that. And I still want them to be fun, because Inteleon is very fun to play. And I still want them to be as fun as they are currently. Yeah, I hope you guys liked that and enjoyed this sort of commentary. As you can see, this match went pretty well. I was thinking another good thing about Inteleon and what people don't realize is that Inteleon's in matches that do decent, they get a huge level lead and they become unstoppable. It's like one of those Pokemon where I think like, what's another example? Scizor. I feel like people don't say this a lot, but if Scizor gets like a level, if he does really good and he gets like a level 15 lead, he can become virtually unkillable. And same thing with Inteleon. Inteleon becomes virtually unkillable to the point where you can just get like, you can one-shot most attackers super easily with liquidation. Even if it's not even charged, you can one-shot them. It's crazy. Hope you guys enjoyed this more of a discussion style video talking about nerfs and what Unite can do to balance, specifically Inteleon. I wanted to choose a Pokemon that wasn't talked about as much, or a Pokemon that is known to be a little bit strong but isn't talked about as much as far as like what to do with it, because Inteleon's a Pokemon I think that even if the player base is like, yeah, this is kind of really strong, I feel like they can all agree that it's also pretty fun. So I wanted to touch on how to nerf Pokemon without making it unplayable or unfun to play as anymore. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Syke out.